I found the alien princess beneath her wrecked royal shuttle, breathing beside 3 guards who had left her there. My scanner painted the crushed hull in pale blue lines as I stepped over a slab of black armor plating, boots grinding against crystalline dust. The emergency lights inside the wreck flashed red every 4 seconds. Somewhere behind the bulkhead, a damaged coolant pump clicked like a mechanical heartbeat. I was Caleb Voss, Terran Mercenary, 36, and I had been paid to retrieve one living ethery woman from Kepri 9. No name, no photograph, just coordinates, biometric parameters, and enough credits to make a careful man suspicious. I wasn't careful enough to turn it down. The locator brought me 17 miles from the abandoned mining settlement, straight to a royal transport buried nose first in the gray surface. Its engines were cold. The metal under my glove felt almost brittle, and the air carried the sharp smell of burned insulation through my helmet filters. I ducked beneath a fractured support beam. Target beacon acquired, my suit whispered. 40 feet. 26. 11. Then I saw her. She lay beneath a collapsed section of the passenger compartment, one shoulder pressed against silver deck plating. Tall, ethery, deep blue skin caught the pulsing emergency light with a faint pearl sheen, and thin luminous markings curved from her temples toward her throat. Her nearly translucent white-blue hair was tangled with dust. One gold-ringed eye opened as my shadow crossed her face. Her hand moved instantly. A broken ceremonial blade scraped across the floor and stopped against my boot. Human, she whispered. I crouched but kept my hands where she could see them. Good guess. Her fingers tightened around the blade. Even pinned beneath wreckage, she was trying to decide whether she could kill me. That told me more than begging would have. I'm not with your guards, I said. Her eyes shifted past me toward the open hull. They are gone. I noticed. I scanned the beam trapping her. 280 pounds, maybe more. My suit could lift it. Before touching anything, I ran the medical scanner across her torso. Bruising, dehydration, elevated pulse. Then a warning symbol appeared over her upper back. Foreign energy residue. I frowned and changed spectrum. The scanner reconstructed a narrow burn across the rear plate of her royal armor. Plasma discharge. Close range. I looked toward the wreckage around us. The shuttle had crashed hard, but crashes didn't shoot passengers in the back. Don't move. I have had little choice in that matter. Her voice was thin, but the edge remained. I almost smiled. Instead, I magnified the residue profile. My visor matched it to particles embedded in the shuttle wall. E3 military plasma. Royal issue. The princess watched my face rather than the display. What did you find? I didn't answer yet. I braced beneath the beam, servos whining around my shoulders, and lifted. Metal groaned. She dragged herself clear, refusing my hand until the deck shifted beneath her. Then her fingers locked around my wrist. Cold skin. Surprisingly strong grip. I lowered her against an intact bulkhead and finally noticed the torn outline on her chest armor where an insignia had been deliberately removed. Not lost in the crash. Cut away. I pulled up the contract and compared her biometrics. Every indicator turned green. Target confirmed. My helmet displayed her identity a second later, decrypted from the royal implant at her collarbone. Princess Sailora V. Yell. A distant engine note rolled through the wreck. Sailora's grip tightened around the broken blade. I checked the tactical scanner. 3 E3 military signatures had just entered orbit. Royal Guard transponders. Your rescue team? I asked. She looked toward the dark opening in the hull, then at the plasma mark my scanner still projected across her back. No, she said. Outside, 3 royal ships began descending toward us. They came back to make certain I died. The first royal ship dropped below the cloud deck while I was still locking Sailora into my emergency harness. Blue-white engine lights swept through the broken shuttle, turning every fractured edge of metal into a blade of color. The deck vibrated beneath my knees. Dust trickled from the ceiling, and the sour smell of overheated wiring thickened inside my helmet. Can you walk? I asked. Sailora planted one hand against the bulkhead and forced herself upright. Her knees nearly folded. She caught the wall before I could catch her. Yes. That wasn't walking. It was standing. Close enough. I clipped the harness around her waist and transferred part of her weight to my suit. My tactical display showed 3 descending contacts, the nearest less than 4 miles away. We had minutes, not hours. Sailora glanced toward the opening. Leave me. I turned to her. Excuse me. Your contract cannot possibly be worth dying for. You don't know my contract. I know mercenaries. Her gold-ringed eyes settled on the scratches across my chest plate. Every one of you has a price. True. I brought the contract onto my wrist display and held it between us. Mine's already been agreed upon. The text floated above my gauntlet. Extraction contract. 1 living ethery female. Kepri 9. Delivery required alive. She read it twice. Her luminous markings brightened faintly beneath the red emergency lights. There is no name. No royal designation. No. Then you did not know who you were coming for. Still don't care. A heavy boom rolled across the wreck as the first ship entered the lower atmosphere. I collapsed the display and pulled a compact breaching tool from my belt. The main passage was blocked, so I drove the tool into a maintenance seam beside us. The cutter screamed against alloy. Orange sparks sprayed across the deck, hot enough that I smelled scorched metal through the filters. Sailora watched me work. How much? She asked. What? How much is my life worth to you? The panel broke loose. I kicked it inward, revealing a narrow service tunnel washed in weak amber light. Enough to get you out, I said. Not enough to own you. For the first time since I found her, the broken blade lowered. Only an inch. It was enough. I climbed into the tunnel and pulled her after me. The metal walls were cold against my shoulders, barely 3 feet across, forcing us forward single file. Behind us came the distant hydraulic thump of a boarding ramp striking the ground. They had landed. Sailora stopped. I heard voices, filtering through the wreckage. Ethery, amplified through military helmets. Royal Recovery Unit, one voice announced. Princess Sailora Vale, respond. Her hand tightened around my shoulder strap. They know I am alive. Then we stopped being here. I crawled faster. The tunnel ended at an exterior maintenance hatch welded shut by the crash. I planted both boots against the frame and shoved. Nothing. Footsteps rang through the shuttle behind us. Closer. Metal against metal. I switched my suit servos to emergency output. Warning symbols flashed across my visor as the motors whined around my legs. Move back. Sailora pressed herself against the tunnel wall. I drove both heels into the hatch. Once. Twice. On the third strike, the seal tore loose and the panel dropped into the gray dust outside. Freezing air rushed through the opening. I jumped down 8 feet, turned, and caught Sailora as she followed. Behind us, a royal guard shouted. A pulse of blue light flashed through the tunnel and struck the ground beside my boot, throwing hot grit against my armor. So much for pretending they had come to rescue her. My rover waited half a mile across open terrain. I looked at Sailora. She looked at the distant vehicle, then at her shaking legs. You cannot carry me that far and outrun them. Probably not. I crouched with my back toward her. Get on. She stared at me. Another pulse cracked against the wreck behind us. That decided it. Her arms locked around my shoulders, and my suit compensated as I rose. I started running. My boots hammered the hard ground while royal engines screamed overhead. The rover grew larger through the dust. 800 feet. 500. 300. A shadow passed over us. Sailora looked up. Caleb. I saw the targeting beam sweep across the ground. We reached the rover as the first royal ship banked around for another pass. I threw Sailora into the passenger seat, slammed the canopy shut, and punched the ignition. The electric drive howled. Gravel sprayed behind us. The princess braced herself against the dashboard as I drove straight toward the abandoned mining city rising from the horizon. Where are you taking me? She demanded. I locked the controls, tore the tracking beacon from my shoulder armor, and crushed it beneath my gauntlet. The signal vanished from my display. 3 royal ships immediately changed course toward us. I looked at Sailora. Your guards already made their choice. I pushed the throttle to maximum. Now I'm making mine. The rover hit the mining road at 70 miles an hour, and the first royal gunship came down behind us. I kept the throttle pinned while Kepri 9 blurred past the canopy in streaks of gray stone and rusted machinery. Warning tones pulsed inside the cabin. The steering column vibrated against my gloves, and every few seconds blue light spilled across the dashboard as the gunship's targeting array searched for us. Sailora sat braced beside me, one hand gripping the overhead rail, the other holding that broken ceremonial blade across her lap. She had stopped telling me to leave her. That was progress. Two behind us, I said. Third one. She checked the side mirror. Moving ahead. They're boxing us in. The abandoned mining city rose less than 2 miles away, a forest of black processing towers and elevated or conveyors. Good cover. Terrible roads. I swung between two overturned cargo haulers just as a plasma burst struck the ground behind us. The impact flashed white in the mirror. Gravel hammered the rover's underside like thrown nails. Sailor ducked, then immediately straightened. They are firing directly at the vehicle. Yeah, Royal Rescue seems different where you come from. Her jaw tightened. I drove through a collapsed security gate. Steel screamed along the rover's left side, peeling away one mirror, and suddenly we were inside the dead city. Narrow service lanes replaced open terrain. Pipes crossed overhead. Frost-coated old extraction tanks despite the heat bleeding from our engine, and the cabin filled with the bitter smell of hot electrical insulation. The gunships couldn't follow at full speed. That bought us seconds. I needed more. Take the wheel. Sailor looked at me. I have never operated a human ground vehicle. Today's educational. I grabbed her wrist and put her hand on the steering column. Keep us between the buildings. Caleb, preferably without hitting one. I released the controls and twisted around in my seat. My rover carried exactly one piece of equipment expensive enough to hurt losing. A portable decoy transmitter designed to imitate a mercenary ship's emergency beacon. I pulled it from the storage rack, armed it, and watched its green status light blink against my glove. Sailor took a corner too sharply. My shoulder slammed into the cabin wall. That was a building. We did not hit it. You're learning. I cracked the rear hatch. Cold air punched into the cabin, carrying metallic dust across my faceplate. One gunship appeared between the towers behind us. I waited until its nose aligned with the service lane, then threw the transmitter onto an automated or cart sitting beside the road. The device magnetized to the cart. I fired one pulse from my sidearm into the cart's dormant control box. Sparks jumped. Ancient motors groaned awake. The cart lurched down a branching tunnel while the transmitter began broadcasting my identification at maximum power. The pursuing gunship banked after it. One problem removed without firing at a single guard. I sealed the hatch and reclaimed the wheel. Sailor watched the gunship disappear. You could have killed them. Could have. They tried to kill me. I noticed that too. Then why spare them? I glanced at her. Because my contract says extraction, not revenge. Something changed in the way she looked at me. Before she could answer, every screen in the rover went gold. An encrypted royal transmission seized the communications system. A helmeted E3 officer appeared across the windshield display. His silver armor carried the same insignia as the weapon's residue from Sailor's shuttle. Princess Silura Vale, he said, his voice filling the cabin. The human mercenary transporting you has interfered with a lawful royal recovery operation. Sailor leaned toward the screen. You left me beneath a crashed ship. The officer did not blink. Your condition was judged unrecoverable. Her fingers slowly curled around the edge of the dashboard. I was conscious when you departed. Silence answered her for half a second. That was enough. Then the officer looked directly at me. Mercenary Caleb Voss. Stop your vehicle and surrender the princess. You will receive full payment and safe passage off Kepri 9. My contract display chimed. A new offer appeared. 10 times the original amount. I looked at the number. Then at Sailora. She said nothing. No royal command. No plea. She simply sat there while the people sworn to protect her offered a stranger a fortune to hand her back. I reached toward the display. The officer's mouth almost formed a smile. I pressed decline. Then I killed the receiver. His face vanished. Ahead, the road divided. The left route led toward my extraction point. The right descended beneath the city into the old industrial tunnels, away from my ship and deeper into Kepri 9. I turned right. Sailor stared at the tunnel swallowing us. Your ship is the other direction. I know. Then what are you doing? The last daylight disappeared behind us as I accelerated into the dark. Making sure the next time your guards see you, they don't get to decide whether you live. The tunnel floor vanished beneath the rover, and Sailor grabbed the wheel before I could. My headlights dropped into empty blackness where the old mining road had collapsed, revealing a shaft nearly 60 feet across. I slammed the brakes. Tires screamed against metal grating, filling the cabin with the smell of burned rubber as the rover skidded sideways. Sailora hauled the steering column left with both hands. The rear wheels slipped over the edge. For one weightless second, I saw nothing beyond her window except darkness and distant amber maintenance lights. Then the front tires caught. I hit reverse. The electric motors shrieked, and the rover crawled backward until all four wheels touched solid ground. Sailora released the wheel. "Still educational?" she asked. "You're getting annoyingly good at this." A dull vibration traveled through the tunnel behind us. Not engines. Boots. Royal Guard infantry had entered the underground network. I killed the headlights. Darkness swallowed the cabin, broken only by green instrument lights reflecting across Sailora's gold-ringed eyes. "Vehicle. Stays here," I whispered. "From now on, we walk." I pulled a thermal cloak from the emergency compartment and wrapped it around her damaged royal armor. The fabric was coarse and gray, designed to scatter infrared scans. She tried standing without help. Her left leg shook once, then steadied. I offered my arm anyway. She ignored it. Definitely royalty. We moved through a maintenance passage barely wide enough for two people. Condensation dripped from overhead pipes, cold against my exposed jaw whenever it found the gap beneath my helmet. Somewhere below us, enormous dormant machinery ticked as metal contracted. The air smelled of mineral dust and old lubricant. My map showed an orbital freight elevator roughly 3 miles east. If its emergency system still worked, it could put us close enough to orbit for another extraction option. If they didn't, I had just driven us into a tomb. We reached a circular junction where 6 passages met. My human navigation overlay displayed 5 as collapsed. Sailora stopped beside the 6th. "Not that one. It's the only open route." She ran her fingertips across symbols carved into the wall beneath layers of grime. Human miners added these tunnels around older ethery infrastructure. This marking means pressure transfer. Meaning if we enter while the lower chamber is cycling, the door seals behind us. I heard the approaching boots again. "Closer now. Can you get us through?" Sailora studied the ancient control plate. Then she tore the thermal cloak away and knelt despite the pain in her side. Her fingers moved across the crystalline interface. Nothing happened. She pressed her palm against its center. The panel flashed gold. A low mechanical tone rolled through the floor. A section of wall split apart. "Move," she said. We slipped through. The guards rounded the junction behind us, just as Sailora struck another symbol. The door began closing. A blue plasma pulse flashed through the narrowing gap and struck a conduit overhead. Steam exploded into the corridor with a deafening hiss. I pulled Sailora down as fragments of insulation scattered across my armor. The door sealed. Silence returned except for our breathing. "You just saved us," I said. She pushed herself upright. "Try not to sound surprised." "I'm adjusting." The chamber ahead opened into an enormous vertical refinery shaft. Narrow maintenance bridges crossed it at different heights, suspended over machinery disappearing hundreds of feet below. Pale gold strips glowed along the rails. Sailora stepped onto the first bridge. A warning tone sounded immediately. The ancient system had recognized her royal implant. Lights ignited downward through the shaft, one level after another, until the entire structure awakened. Then the bridge moved. "Sailora." I did not command that. Sections of walkway rotated beneath us, rearranging toward a distant elevator platform. Behind the sealed door, the royal guards began cutting through. Orange light appeared around its edges. I raised my sidearm toward it. Sailora caught my wrist. "No, they're 30 seconds away. And there are more ahead." She pointed across the shaft. 4 armored silhouettes had emerged beside the elevator. We were trapped between 2 teams. I moved in front of her. She stepped around me. "What are you doing?" "Something you cannot." She pulled the remains of the royal insignia from beneath her damaged armor and pressed it against the bridge control pedestal. Gold light flooded the chamber. Every maintenance barrier between us and the elevator rose. Every barrier around the guards slammed shut. The 4 soldiers stopped. For the first time, I watched royal guards hesitate in front of the woman they had abandoned. Sailora straightened despite the tremor in her legs. The luminous lines along her neck burned silver white. This station still recognizes the authority they tried to bury. The elevator doors opened behind her. She looked at me and extended her hand. "You got me this far, mercenary." I took it. "Now let your princess get you out." The elevator doors sealed just as something heavy struck them from the other side. The impact rang through the cabin like a hammer against a steel drum. Saylora's hand was still inside mine. Neither of us mentioned it. She released me first and pressed her palm against the crystalline control panel. Gold. Symbols rippled beneath her fingers, and the elevator dropped into the shaft so fast my stomach seemed to remain several floors above us. Where does this go? I asked. Orbital transfer level. That sounds useful. It was when Kepri 9 still had an orbital tether. I looked at her. You could have mentioned the past tense. A second impact echoed somewhere above. Then the lights went out. Total black. The elevator jerked hard enough to throw me against the wall. Emergency strips flickered red along the floor, painting Saylora's face in narrow bands of light. The air circulation stopped. A sharp electrical smell drifted from the ceiling vents. My visor filled with warnings. Power failure. Cabin pressure falling. Oxygen reserve, 11 minutes. Ion surge, I said. The storm reached the city grid. Saylora touched the wall. Frost was already forming beneath her fingertips. Can the elevator restart? Not before we suffocate. I opened the emergency panel with my knife. Behind it sat an old pressure manifold, 2 dead pumps, and 1 mechanical oxygen line. 1 line. I pulled the hose free and checked the gauge. Enough flow for 1 adult at rest. Maybe. Put this on. I handed Saylora the mask. She stared at it. No, princess. Your physiology consumes more oxygen than mine. Congratulations. You've discovered another reason to wear the mask. I pushed it toward her. She caught my wrist. If you collapse, I cannot carry you. If you collapse, I don't get paid. You declined 10 times your payment less than an hour ago. Fair point. The oxygen warning dropped to 9 minutes. Above us, metal groaned through the shaft. The royal guards were still moving. I could hear faint mechanical vibrations through the elevator frame as they forced another route downward. We had escaped their weapons and trapped ourselves in a box. Saylora took the mask. Then, instead of putting it on, she examined the connector. What are you doing? Solving your argument. She removed a narrow breathing tube from the medical collar inside her damaged armor and pushed it against the human fitting. Wrong size. She wrapped a strip of sealing fabric around the joint and twisted until it held. That will reduce pressure. By half. Exactly. I understood. No. She looked directly at me. You accepted the contract. I did not accept becoming cargo. The elevator gave another violent shudder. Dust fell from the ceiling. I took the improvised splitter from her, tested the seal, then connected my emergency mask to the second line. If this fails, then we will have wasted several minutes arguing. You really are royalty. Breathe, Caleb. We sat on the floor beneath the emergency panel, shoulders against cold metal. The oxygen hissed softly between us. Every inhale tasted faintly of rubber and recycled air. Red light pulsed across the cabin. Saylora's luminous markings had dimmed to thin silver threads along her throat. The temperature fell below 40 degrees. I pulled the thermal cloak around both our shoulders without asking. This time she didn't object. For several minutes, there was only the click of cooling metal, the soft hiss of the shared oxygen line, and our breathing finding the same slow rhythm. Then Saylora's head settled against the wall beside mine. The broken ceremonial blade remained across her knees, but her fingers loosened around its handle. When my guards departed, she said quietly, I heard their engines leave. I turned toward her. She kept looking at the opposite wall. I called after them until the shuttle lost power. Her thumb moved once across the chipped edge of the blade. They had sworn their lives to mine since I was a child. The oxygen line hissed between us. And then you arrived. I had no useful answer for that, so I checked the pressure gauge. 7 minutes. Saylora looked at my hand. You keep checking. Occupational habit. You expect the oxygen to disappear faster if you stop watching it? Basically. A small sound escaped her. Not quite laughter, but close. Then the entire cabin lurched upward. The oxygen hose ripped from the wall. Silence. The gauge died instantly. My visor recalculated. Remaining cabin oxygen, for 12. Saylora rose beside me, using the wall for support. Somewhere above, machinery thundered back to life, followed by the unmistakable metallic clank of the royal guards entering the shaft. For minutes of air, one sealed elevator, and the people who had left Saylora to die were coming down to finish the job. I had 3 minutes and 41 seconds of air when Saylora reached for the dead control panel. Save your strength, I said. She ignored me. Her palm struck the crystalline surface once, twice, then stayed there as faint gold lines crawled beneath her fingers. Above us, the royal guards descended through the shaft with a steady metallic rhythm. Clank. Pause. Clank. Each sound came closer. The cabin had fallen below 38 degrees, cold enough that my breath clouded inside the red emergency light. Burned circuitry left a coppery taste at the back of my throat. The station recognized you before, I said. Can you make it do that again? Not without power. Sailora pulled the broken ceremonial blade from her belt and drove its narrow tip beneath the panel's edge. Then why are you opening it? Because royal devices carry independent authentication cells. The cover snapped loose. Inside, a crystal no larger than my thumb gave off a weak amber glow. Sailora removed it and pressed it against the implant at her collarbone. Gold symbols burst across the panel. The elevator shuddered. My visor jumped from 309 to 258 as we both used more air. Come on, I muttered. Sailora's fingers moved through the symbols. A mechanical lock released beneath our feet. Maintenance hatch. I dropped to one knee, tore up the floor plate, and found a narrow ladder descending into darkness. Cold air rose from below. Thin, stale, but breathable. You first. Caleb, we're not debating oxygen again. She lowered herself onto the ladder. I followed and pulled the hatch shut just as blue light flashed through the elevator above. The guards had reached it. We climbed down 20 feet and emerged into a service corridor lined with old pressure pipes. Dim amber lamps flickered overhead. My boots splashed through an inch of freezing condensation, and the air smelled like rust and mineral oil. Sailora leaned against the wall, breathing slowly. I checked my map. Orbital transfer platform is 900 yards east. There is something you need to know before we reach it. Can it wait 900 yards? No, that stopped me. She removed the royal authentication crystal and held it toward my wrist computer. Open your contract. Now. Open it. I brought up the extraction file. She touched the crystal to my display. The contract changed. Not the payment. Not the destination. A dormant authorization layer unlocked beneath the original text. One that had been encrypted beyond anything my civilian system could read. An E3 royal seal appeared. I looked from it to her. You commissioned this? Yes. You hired me. 3 months ago. Behind us, metal slammed. The guards had opened the elevator hatch. I grabbed Sailora's arm and moved us down the corridor. You want to explain why a princess hired a mercenary 3 months before she needed rescuing? I created an emergency extraction contract in case my own protection detail became compromised. And you picked a human? I picked you. We reached a pressure door. Sailora authenticated it while I watched the corridor behind us. The door opened with a deep hiss, releasing warmer air carrying the dry smell of old filtration systems. We stepped through. Why me? The door sealed behind us. Sailora looked at my contract display instead of my face. Your combat record was not exceptional enough. Thanks. Your completion rate was better. But that was not why. She touched the screen. A single archived line appeared beneath my mercenary profile. Payment forfeited, civilian extraction prioritized. I remembered the job. I remembered the money I hadn't collected. I had never expected anyone else to care. You abandoned a profitable objective to evacuate civilians from the opposing side, she said. Your employer called it breach of contract. They were trapped. Exactly. Footsteps struck the far side of the pressure door. Sailora stepped closer, her silver markings bright against the amber light. My guards were bound to me by blood oath, rank, and imperial law. I needed someone bound by none of those things. The first cutting torch burned through the door behind us, filling the corridor with orange light. I raised my weapon. Sailora put her hand over the barrel and lowered it. I did not hire you because I believed a mercenary would obey me, Caleb. Her gold-ringed eyes held mine, while molten sparks began falling from the door. I hired you because I believed that when everyone sworn to protect me chose to leave me behind, you would be the one man who wouldn't. The pressure door burst inward before I could answer her, and I pulled Sailora toward the orbital platform. Orange sparks chased us across the floor as royal guards poured into the corridor behind us. Their boots struck the metal decking in disciplined rhythm. No warnings this time. No offer of rescue. A blue plasma pulse snapped past my shoulder and burst against a pipe. filling the passage with white steam and the bitter smell of scorched insulation. How far? I shouted. 600 feet. Can you run it? Saylora's answer was to run. Her injured leg dragged slightly, but she kept moving, one hand brushing the wall whenever her balance slipped. I stayed behind her, firing 2 controlled shots into an overhead junction box. The lights behind us died. Darkness swallowed the guards while emergency strips ahead remained amber. It bought us maybe 10 seconds. We reached the orbital transfer platform with 7. The chamber was enormous, circular, and almost empty. Frost glittered across the floor beneath weak gold lights. At its center sat one surviving emergency pod beneath a retractable launch cradle. 1 pod, 2 seats, according to the faded markings. I almost laughed. Then I saw the status panel. Life support capacity, 1 occupant. The second seat had been stripped for parts decades ago. Sailor saw it too. Behind us, the pressure door began cycling open. Get inside, I said. No, we've done this conversation. Then you know my answer. She crossed to the launch console and placed her royal authentication crystal against it. The pod awakened with a rising electrical hum. White cabin lights blinked on. The pod can reach the abandoned orbital cargo ring, she said. Your ship's emergency systems could rendezvous with it remotely. Good. I opened the hatch. In. She didn't move. Caleb, the launch cradle must be released manually. I looked. At the mechanical lever 30 feet away. Of course it did. I'll handle it. And the guards. The pressure door opened 6 inches. Blue light appeared beneath it. I took Sailora by the shoulders and turned her toward the pod. You hired me to extract you. I hired you because I believed you would not abandon me. Exactly. That does not mean I hired you to die for me. The door rose another foot. I could see armored boots beyond it. Sailora stepped away from the pod. She drew her broken ceremonial blade and faced the entrance. I remain. No, that is a royal order. You specifically hired someone who doesn't follow those. I grabbed her around the waist, lifted her despite the furious ethery words my translator decided not to repeat, and put her inside the pod. She struck the hatch release before I could close it. Caleb, her voice changed. Quiet now. If you launch this, they will kill you. I looked at the royal guards forcing the door upward, then at her. Maybe. I slammed the hatch shut. Her palm hit the transparent canopy. Mine rested against the outside for half a second. Then I turned away. I ran toward the manual release as the first guard ducked beneath the rising door. 20 feet. 15. 10. I reached the lever and pulled. Nothing. Corrosion had frozen it in place. I braced both boots against the deck and pulled again. My suit servos whined. Metal cracked. The lever dropped. The launch cradle unlocked with a thunderous clang. Saylora's pod shot forward along the magnetic rail. The guards stopped firing at me and raised their weapons toward her. That was their mistake. I hit the emergency diversion switch. Instead of launching toward orbit, the pod vanished sideways into an old maintenance tube beneath the platform. Every targeting display in the chamber followed the decoy launch signal continuing upward. Sailora was still on Kepri 9, still within reach. And now the Royal Guard stood between me and the only route to her. Their commander stepped through the doorway, silver armor reflecting the amber lights. 6 rifles turned toward my chest. I slowly removed my sidearm and let it hang at my side. The commander raised his weapon. Where is the princess? I looked toward the dark maintenance tube where her pod had disappeared, then back at the men who had already left her to die once. I tightened my grip on the pistol. You're going to have to get through me to abandon her twice. I let the pistol fall before the Royal Guards could decide whether 6 rifles were enough. It struck the frost-covered deck with a hard metallic crack and spun to a stop between us. The commander's helmet retracted. I recognized the same narrow face from the transmission in the rover, silver markings running from his eyes into the collar of his armor. A sensible decision, he said. Don't get used to it. Behind him, the launch chamber smelled of hot circuitry and burned metal. Amber emergency lights reflected from 6 polished breastplates while the maintenance tube behind me remained completely dark. Somewhere inside it, Saylora's pod was still moving. That was all that mattered. The commander stepped closer. Princess Sailora is legally dead. I said nothing. Her death was confirmed to the Imperial Council 43 minutes ago. The succession protocols have begun. You work fast. We work efficiently. He raised one gauntlet. My wrist computer chimed. The offer I had rejected appeared again. 10 times my original payment, accompanied by immediate off-world clearance. Tell me where you sent her. I looked at the number. Enough credits for a new ship. Enough to stop taking contracts for years. And if I don't, then you will share the fate you have worked so hard to delay. One of the guards moved toward the maintenance controls. I glanced at the overhead launch display. Sailor's decoy signal was still climbing toward orbit. Perfect. I lifted both hands. You want the princess? The commander's eyes narrowed. That has been clear. Then you're looking in the wrong direction. I pointed upward. Every helmet turned toward the orbital telemetry screen. Just for a second, I drove my heel down on the pistol lying beside my boot. The weapon skidded across the deck and struck the emergency release pedal beneath the launch console. Warning sirens exploded through the chamber. Red lights replaced amber. The magnetic rail discharged its stored launch energy into the empty cradle with a thunderous electrical snap. Nobody fired. They couldn't see through the shower of white sparks. I ran, not toward the guards, toward the communications pedestal. The commander caught my shoulder and spun me around. I drove my forearm against his weapon, knocking the barrel aside as a blue pulse flashed harmlessly into the ceiling. He hit harder than he looked. My back slammed against the pedestal. The breath left my lungs. I didn't hit him back. I only needed one hand free. My palm struck the data port. External broadcast, I said. My wrist computer connected. The commander froze. Stop. That was the first time I heard uncertainty in his voice. I opened the shuttle telemetry I had automatically copied when my suit scanned Sailor's wreck. Royal Guard transponders departing while her life signs remained active. Their weapons discharge. Their return. Their transmission offering me payment to surrender her. Not a mystery anymore. Not evidence hidden in some forgotten file. Everything we had survived since I found her. You transmit that, the commander said, and you destabilize an empire. I looked past him at the men who had sworn to protect her. You should have thought about that before leaving her under a shuttle. He raised his rifle. I pressed send. The files vanished into Kepri 9's surviving civilian relay network, duplicated across mining satellites and commercial emergency channels before anyone could stop them. The commander fired at the pedestal. The screen went black. Too late. Every guard's helmet began chiming at once. Incoming transmissions. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Sailor's death announcement had met proof that she was alive. The commander stared at me across the smoking console. His rifle slowly lowered. A new voice filled the chamber through every open channel. Sailora. Commander. He went perfectly still. Your Highness. Her voice carried the faint mechanical echo of the maintenance pod. You told the Empire I was dead. None of the guards moved. I am ordering you to stand down. The commander looked at his soldiers. Then at me. Then toward the black maintenance tube where the woman he had abandoned was returning under her own authority. One rifle lowered. Then another. Then all six. The commander was the last. His weapon touched the deck with a quiet click just as Sailora's pod emerged from the darkness behind me. The hatch opened. She stepped out slowly, injured, exhausted, still wearing damaged armor with its royal insignia torn away. Yet every guard in the chamber dropped to one knee. Sailora stopped beside me. She did not look at them. She looked at the human mercenary they had just offered a fortune to betray her. Caleb Voss, she said softly, your extraction contract is not finished. I picked up my pistol and holstered it. Good. Behind us, the commander remained kneeling. Ahead, the orbital route was finally open. And for the first time since I found her beneath that wreck, the royal guards were no longer deciding whether their princess lived. She was. I finished the contract 3 days later when Sailora walked into her own throne room alive. The doors opened 20 feet ahead of us with a low crystalline hum, spilling white gold light across the polished black floor. Hundreds of etheries stood beneath the vaulted ceiling, silent enough that I could hear the cooling fans inside my battered armor. Sailora walked beside me without assistance. Her damaged royal plate had been cleaned but not replaced. The missing insignia remained missing. The scratches remained visible. So did the thin silver markings glowing along her blue skin. Behind us came the royal guards who had abandoned her on Kepri 9. No rifles. No ceremonial formation. Their commander walked with his helmet beneath one arm, while public displays across the chamber replayed the transmission I had sent, their ships departing the crash, while Sailora's life signs remained active, followed by their return to finish what they had started. Nobody needed an explanation. Sailora reached the throne and stopped. She did not sit. "Look at me," she said. The commander raised his head. "You swore your lives to mine." Her voice carried cleanly through the chamber. "When keeping that oath became dangerous, you decided my life was worth less than your obedience to those who wanted me gone." He lowered his eyes. Sailora turned toward the assembled officials. "Their weapons will be surrendered. Their authority is revoked. They will answer under imperial law in open proceedings. No execution, no revenge, just consequence. I like that." Then she looked at me. Caleb Voss. Every face in the room turned toward the human wearing scratched mercenary armor on a royal floor. I checked my wrist computer. "Technically, Your Highness, you're delivered." A few people shifted at that. Sailora almost smiled. "Technically, I'm particular about contracts." She descended the steps until she stood directly in front of me. An attendant approached carrying a crystalline tablet. "A royal estate," Sailora said. "Permanent citizenship. A commission commanding my reconstructed protection detail. And sufficient credits that you would never need to accept another mercenary contract." I looked at the tablet, then at her. "No." The room became very quiet. Sailora tilted her head. "No. The agreed payment is enough. You crossed Kepri, 9 under fire. Contract. You rejected 10 times your fee. Bad client." A tiny laugh escaped somewhere in the chamber before being strangled into silence. Sailora stepped closer. "You gave up your extraction route. Needed the pod. You stood between me and 6 armed royal guards. They were in the way." Now she did smile. Small, tired, real. "There was a moment," she said, lowering her voice, "when you could have escaped alone. I knew which one. The orbital platform. One functioning pod. One life support system. One obvious solution. Why didn't you?" she asked. I looked past her at the commander kneeling beneath the evidence of what his oath had been worth. Then I looked at my wrist. The contract still showed one unfinished line. "Delivery confirmation required." I held the display towards Sailora. She pressed her thumb against it. The screen flashed green. "Contract complete." My payment arrived with a soft chime. "Because I took the job," I said. For several seconds, she simply watched me. Then Sailora reached beneath the collar of her repaired armor and removed the royal authentication crystal that had opened every locked door between Kepri, 9 and home. She placed it in my palm and closed my fingers around it. "Not payment," she said. "Then what?" "Proof that when everyone carrying my crest abandoned me, someone carrying none of it stayed." I looked down at the crystal glowing between the scars on my glove. No medal, no rank, no fortune, just a piece of her world small enough to fit in one human hand. I clipped it beside my mercenary tag. Sailora returned to the throne. This time, when she sat, nobody in the chamber looked at the missing insignia on her armor. They looked at the princess who had survived without it. I turned toward the doors. Behind me, the guards who had sworn to die for her remained on their knees. At my chest, beside the tag of a man who had only promised to do a job, her crystal gave off one quiet golden light. Her guards had given her an oath and left her to die. I had given her my word, and that had been enough.